In this video, I want to introduce to you in some detail the vertical charts, why we use them, how we use them, and how they can be of a benefit to you. And so, when it comes to your study with us, there's many different ways you could record the things you learned. Certainly, you would need to have some method. You could use a journal, you could use a notepad, you could even use the famous yellow pad. You could record things on the dictaphone. You could, well, I'm sure you could imagine other ways as well. In the method we use in the SBS, we use what we call the vertical chart. There we are, that's what it is. It's simply a sheet of paper and there's a box down the center, and each of the smaller boxes represent one of the paragraphs, and it becomes a very visual way of you being able to see the work you've done on a segment. So let's go back and just refresh our memory on this. When you were in Module 1, Unit 3 of Titus, in Lesson 5, you did the paragraph titles, and it talks about structure and the key verse. And there is a list of paragraph titles that I had. This is the new RSV. If you are using the ESV, yours will be slightly different. But when you have your paragraph titles, then you're able to look at the structure and remember paragraphs grouped together to make segments. In the example, we grouped together the first group of paragraphs there up to chapter 2, verse 10, and that becomes a segment with the title Teach Sound Doctrine, and then the rest Living by God's Grace. And so Titus is a short book. It has a very simple structure. So when it comes to the vertical chart, each paragraph is represented with the appropriate size box. Longer paragraphs have more space. Shorter paragraphs have less space. We can talk more about that as we talk about creating these charts. But notice at the top we have the number of the segment, segment 1, the title, and then the reference. And then inside the boxes we have the paragraph title. So each little box represents a paragraph, and you put your titles for each paragraph inside the box. This is a closer view, just so you can see how we've done this for this particular segment. And then of course there was 2 segments in Titus. So for the second segment we have again a box, a big box, and the smaller boxes inside represents the paragraphs. You'll notice that each of the little boxes is proportionate to the size of the paragraph. And then we have the segment number, the title, and then the reference. And so in the SBS language, every vertical chart is a segment. A segment, a vertical chart, it's the same thing. There we are, just a closer view, if that's easier for you to see. Now, how do we produce this? Well, there's 3 ways. Most, I think, would use the charting program, and I'm going to give a demonstration on how to use the SBS charting online program. But you do need a stable internet for this, because all of your work is online. If you don't have a stable internet, we recommend using a word processor. And we have instructions on how to do that further on in this unit. For people who are using a mobile device, if that's how you're doing the course, then probably you would need to do your vertical charts by hand. And again, we have instructions on how to do that. And remember, your staff are there to help you. All of this is a new skill, and each skill has a learning curve, and we want to support you through this so that very quickly this becomes easy for you and it becomes a useful tool. Now, why do we use vertical charts and not just a notebook? What you'll discover is the actual process of filling in the charts supports the inductive approach. It is very effective in that, because all the time you will see you're thinking observation, interpretation, application. It's a convenient and a useful way for you to record the things that you learn. And more than that, the charts, they show clearly how that particular segment works, how the different paragraphs are related to each other. You can record on your vertical chart different elements of composition that you've discovered. They can be clearly seen and recorded. And the act of doing the charts aids the discipline of how to observe, interpret, and apply. Some have found these charts useful for teaching, depending on the kind of support you need when you teach. And the visual elements of charts means it's easier to remember the segments. So often these kind of visual things can be an aid to the memory. This form of recording your findings can keep you systematic and organized in your studies. And of course, you have concrete evidence of your labor. From our side, as the University of the Nations, it gives us a standard way to evaluate and grade your work. As the SBS is an undergraduate course in the university, then we need to have a standard whereby we're able to evaluate what you do. As you know, the online SBS is in many countries around the world. There's many schools, and if you was to go and look at them, you would find that they all do vertical charts slightly differently. But the basic idea is the same for each. With the online SBS, we desire that you have freedom within this basic form. We want this to work for you. Now, we will begin by teaching you a simple method, but it's our desire that these vertical charts become a very useful tool for you as you record the things you've learned. If you've joined the online SBS from a regular residential school, then you will be used to doing your charts in a certain way. And we are fine with you continuing to use whatever particular method you are finding helpful. So your vertical chart looks like this. Each chart represents a segment. Remember, paragraph titles joined together to be a segment. The top of the page will include the segment number, the title, and the reference. That becomes your basic worksheet. The box is proportional to the size of the paragraph. You'll notice that the boxes are just different sizes, but they all are proportion to the paragraph, and the space inside the box is for you to put further observations from the text. The outside of the box is where you record your further insights, observations, interpretations, applications. To help the staff, we're going to ask you to indicate what you're writing, whether it's an observation, interpretation, or application. So that's a basic worksheet. So what do we do with it? Let me say that every step helps you with the inductive study process, as well as giving you a place to record what you learn. And this is the genius of the vertical chart. So inside the box, we want you to put further observations. So I want you to notice the emphasis we have with the SBS. Observation is really important. The first reading, the second reading, the third reading, the paragraph titles. And again, inside the box, we want you to put further observations and we want you to use words from the text. This is an example close up, and what you can see there is that I've added further observations from the text inside the boxes. This is a good place for some kind of color coding, and what you will see here is I've used different colors to highlight different themes that are repeated. Not always the same word, but nonetheless different themes. And we would encourage you to make use of the visual element of your chart in this way. We also want you to put a segment summary on each vertical chart. Now, this segment summary is not observation, it's interpretation. What we want you to do is, in your own words, simply summarize what is going on in this segment. What is it that the author's trying to do? What is he trying to communicate? What are the issues being addressed? How does he address them? This kind of thing. And here we have a close-up example of what I've done. It's talking about the problem of false teachers that have come into the church. Titus has been left behind to sort out the problem and to bring correction to the false teaching and to appoint elders. So that is summarizing that particular segment. And then outside the box, you can put any further observations, interpretation and application. So the words inside the box, these are words from the text. These can be your own words. And here you'll notice I have, this is a close-up, I've noted the list of qualifications of the elder. This is an observation I've made, and I've observed that the qualifications of the elder are a contrast to the description of the false teachers in these verses. And then I brought an interpretation that you can read there, that Paul is not focused on the structure, but rather the quality of leaders that's important. And then I brought an application from that I feel is relevant for today. Now, as I've mentioned, when you write on the outside of your charts, when you have your observations, interpretations, applications, we want you to label them somehow so that the staff, when they're grading your work, are able to see what you've done and are able to help you. One of the biggest challenges is discerning the difference between observation and interpretation. Now, that's a skill that it needs to be developed by all of you. So our staff, we want to help you with that. And so as you identify what you think you're doing, the staff can come alongside, have a look and help you. So you might want to simply put titles above each of the things you write, or there we are, that's a close-up picture, or to use some kind of color coding. And you'll notice that I have a key at the bottom, so the staff will know what you're doing, but the blue is observation, green interpretation, and the purple application. You'll notice that I have further observations and interpretations on the right hand side of the chart, and the whole vertical chart, the whole worksheet is for you to record the things that you want to record. Now, what is required of you? Your staff will let you know that. Each staff person can let you know what the grading criteria is for your work and what the minimum is, if you like. But we do ask that every vertical chart has at least one application, and further information you can ask from your staff. So that is the basic use of a vertical chart. It becomes a very, very useful thing. This is just a closer look at what I had written. Now, some examples of various vertical charts. These are charts that are drawn on a computer using a word processing program. You can get some idea, if I move myself around here, of the different ways of doing it. Again, let me say the amount that is required. You can talk to your staff about that, but you can just see how useful these can be. These are charts that have been written by hand. As I say, we will talk about that. Notice that they've used graph paper, which of course helps with drawing up the box. Incidentally, that is how I did my school back in 1983. We would be using everything by hand, paper and pencil, ruler, to draw up our boxes. And this is a computer program. Now, I've included this. This is not actually the computer program we're going to recommend for you, but I just want you to notice on this how the box has been moved to the left. And rather than writing on both sides, this particular program, the writing is all on the right. On the program that we're going to introduce, you can choose where you want your box. Some people find this helpful. Others find having the columns make it more visual, more representative and more helpful. But that is something that you're able to choose.